right, well, let's jump right into it. 4 powerful strategies. I think it's so important to think about the overarching strategies that we use to further our missions, right? And we're going to put them out there right away, show the cards on what these strategies are, and then we're going to walk through each of them individually. So the 4 strategies: keep major gifts prospects in rotation, treat donors like prospects, set big goals with specific deadlines, and recruit and train a large volunteer team. There are so many opportunities if we can focus in these 4 specific areas. So let's get to it. Keep major gifts prospects in rotation. Let's unpack this. Next slide, please, Trish. There we go. All right. So we know that we can spend tedious amounts of time on information gathering, on spending time planning events, on all the small details of our day-to-day jobs. But if we are not spending the time where it matters most in major gifts, we are not doing our jobs as efficiently and effectively as we can. First and foremost, we need to be constantly cultivating major gift prospects. If you think about a major gift prospect as someone who has the capacity or ability to give your organization at least $50,000, that is impact, right? If we're trying to maximize our revenues, we need to be focused in the area where we can move the needle the most. So if we are constantly cultivating major gift prospects, we are going to be working towards securing those gifts. Cultivation can be a number of things, but it definitely is worth taking the time every single day to make sure that we are moving along major gift prospects. So cultivation can look like talking to a connector who might help us to determine the best strategy for that particular prospect, right? It can be sending a note. It can be setting up a meeting and then planning for the meeting. There's all kinds of things that we can do to make sure that we're moving along these major gift prospects. We should be keeping 10 major gift prospects in rotation at all times. Think of it this way: if you're prioritizing a top 10 list, that's a manageable number of people. And if you can move along at least one person every single day, think about a 5-day work week, you can touch 5 different ones every week. So in a 2-week span, you will have done one step in the cultivation process. And that is completely manageable. It's a completely appropriate set of time to move people along. And if these are at least $50,000 prospects, that's a whole lot of revenue. I was talking with someone earlier today who was talking about, well, we're going to have this event and it brings in lots of money. It brings in at least $100,000. You spend a lot of time planning events. I bet every single person that does some sort of fundraiser event, we spend hours upon hours upon hours planning an event. We could have one prospect who doubles or triples that impact, right? So by keeping these major gift prospects in rotation, continually cultivating them and breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. 10 is a number you can handle, right? Think about that one person every day. Isn't that worth your effort to think a piece of the prospect cultivation process, one person every single day who has the capacity to move the needle of at least $50,000, could be $1 million, right? These are important prospects and we should spend the time. So into the next point, blocking time in our calendar every single day. Show of hands, how many of you actually block time in your calendar for tasks that you know you should be doing outside of meetings? Like, do we actually block time in our calendars? If you don't, you should. I'm guilty of it too. But guess what? If I put that block in there, the likelihood of me actually spending the time doing it increases greatly. Sure, we actually have times where we have to bump that block, but we should be treating it just like a meeting. So even if you don't have a scheduled meeting with a major gift prospect, you should have at least, if not more, 1 hour every single day dedicated to cultivating major gift prospects. And you can define what that is. You can come up with creative ways, but blocking at least an hour, if not a couple of hours every single day in your calendar is going to increase the likelihood of you actually taking the time to do it and not bumping that time to do something else. It's important to set those boundaries, right? I bet we all check our emails a million times a day. If we just shut the email off, dedicate 1 hour of our time to moving the needle on these prospects, we're going to keep moving forward. And if we're not moving forward, we're moving backward because somebody else is, right? So we could be setting up a meeting. We could be following up with information. We could be actually making an ask. We could be contacting their connector. We can be contacting committee members and saying, hey, I'm stuck. I need ideas. Who do we know? Let's brainstorm, right? We could be doing a prospect rating session and redetermining where our top prospects are. How many of us are guilty of saying, oh, they're going to give anyway. We'll just hold on to them for a little bit. Let's find those very best prospects and let's start talking with them. Let's start moving the needle on it, right? So important to keep our major gift prospects in rotation. I see that we have a few chats here and I'm just making sure, are these questions?
I've been kind of answering them.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much, Jake. With that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Shauna. Oh, actually, no, next slide, please. I got distracted. So the result, if we're actually spending the time on keeping these major gift prospects in rotation, the result is a steady stream of major gift revenue. And we know that is by far the largest bucket of fundraising. If we are not putting in the work, we cannot expect to secure these major gifts. It takes time. We have to connect with these people, we have to cultivate them, and we have to ask. So we have to be looking at every stage in the process, and we have to take the time to do it every single day. It's just like if you get a plant and you don't water it, it's going to die, right? We've got to keep cultivating our major gift prospects, and we have got to make the actual asks, and we have to put in the time to do so. So if you want a steady stream of major gift revenue, I suggest that you spend at least 1 hour every single day, block it out in your calendar, and pick one major gift prospect that you are going to move along in the process in some way, shape, or form. Prioritize those top 10 and put them in a rotation. Have a couple of contacts with them in the month, and you're going to constantly reassess if those are your top 10 or if you need to move on to a next one. Bring them in, but keep them in constant rotation. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shauna for the next one.
Thank you so much, Marty. I'm going to continue on with how she used that watering the plants metaphor, but how do we supercharge our fundraising? We continue treating our donors like prospects. Okay. So think of it in terms of watering those plants. One of my favorite things to say, and a soapbox that I can get stuck on for quite some time, is that a lot of times we can move into treating our volunteers like volunteers, and our volunteers are our donors, right? If we're doing our jobs and we're doing them right, we're doing them correctly, our volunteers are our donors. Our donors are so stinking important. The ones that we have right now. Marty did such an excellent job of talking through how to get more donors. But we've really got to focus on the ones that we already have. We need to continue watering the current donors, just as we are watering the prospects, right? So the first step in that is we often stop cultivation after a gift and move on. We can blame this on a million different things. We're too busy moving on to get the next donor. We're trying to get those continued donor dollars through the door. But just working through this very intimately with some committees yesterday with some of our clients, we propose this as this is what the staff's responsibility is, right? So we ask our volunteers to bring their relationships, their prospects to the table, and then they trust us in this next step, that we continue watering that relationship. We continue cultivating that soil even after a gift is made. That's what we bring to the table. So that's a promise that we need to feel as though we can fulfill, is that we continue that cultivation. We don't just get the money, say thank you, and move on to the next ones. And then, what happens the next time we need another donation? They haven't heard from us in quite some time, okay? It is really important to treat those donors like prospects, because otherwise they're going to become prospects again. And if we lose them as actual donors, it's really hard to regain them. As a matter of fact, we have data to back this up. It is 5 to 7 times more expensive to find a new donor. What are we all in charge of? Raising money for our missions, right? At the same time, we should probably be trying to spend less money. And if we can spend less money and retain our current donors by treating them like prospects, I think that's a win-win-win for everyone. It's a win for us. We're spending less money. We're spending less effort. We've already got the people that have bought into the mission. It's a win for the organization because they are gaining donor dollars while they're not spending as much to get new donors. And it's a win for the donors that we have, right? Just thinking about this in terms of ROI, let's focus on treating our donors like prospects, okay? We want to do that by continuously engaging every donor that we have at least every other month. Holy moly, Shauna. Do you know how much time that I have to be able to do this? Do you want to take a look at your ROI for what a stewardship plan looks like? I encourage you. If you don't have a stewardship plans are, I think, one of those. I'm having a really bad day. I'm going to take a look at my stewardship plan and I am going to steward someone and make their day. And that's going to make me feel better. Get a stewardship plan, map it out for an entire year. Okay. And if you don't know where to start and that sounds really overwhelming, then start with your top 10 donors. Start with your top 10 volunteers who are probably also your top 10 donors, and make a stewardship plan for them for the next 12 months. And what does that mean? That we are going to touch, we are going to communicate, we are going to express the impact of their generosity at least every other month. That sounds a little overwhelming. It's not. And here's why. Trish, if you could put that next one up. Here are some examples as to what you can plug into that stewardship calendar, okay? I'm going to send them a birthday card because I'm really good at my job and I know when their birthday is, and I care enough to send them a birthday card to say, hey, you know what? You are moving our mission forward and we want to celebrate you on this day. The anniversary, if you know their anniversary as a couple, as whatever it is, or the anniversary of the gift that they made. So, hey, just wanted to let you know, you made your gift this time last year, and this is what has happened since then. Block it on your calendar. Just like Marty said, you should, as a really successful fundraiser, have a whole bunch of random dates on your calendar. Bill and Barbara's wedding anniversary, Mr. Johnny's gift anniversary, all of these random things with ticklers to remind you that this is within your stewardship calendar, okay? It means the world to someone to get a card that you thought of them. Share stories. This is so stinking easy. We can do this so easily. Go and ask a physician or an instructor or someone who is engaging with the children in, EVS or whatever it is. Have them write a thank you card that says, hey, you know that money that you gave, it makes a difference in my job and what I do every day. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Plop that into one of your months that you need to touch base with them. Thank you calls. Have a thank-a-thon. Oh, my Lanta. There's one of your touch bases, right? And then other holidays. I really like to encourage people to, if you're in healthcare, look at the healthcare months, and if you're doing cardiac, for example, give all your cardiac donors a call during cardiac month. Or if you're in education and it's Thank a Teacher Week or it's Teacher Appreciation, have that be whenever you're reaching out to your donors. You can easily identify, we've identified for you here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways you got to plug in one other way to be able to touch them every other month, right? This is something that we can do. We just have to be intentional about it. And if we're intentional about it, our donors feel engaged, They feel educated. They feel impactful. They feel like they are continually prospects, that we value them just as much as we value the people that we are trying to get donations from. So what's the result of this? We do this and we do it really, really well. I would challenge that not only are our donors going to renew their pledges. So say they're in a pledge, we're doing our jobs really well. They're in a 3-year pledge. And the next time when that's up, we're not just saying, hey, thanks for all you did. We're saying, hey, would you continue on? They're not only continuing and renewing their pledges, I bet they're upgrading their pledges. And I bet that they are saying, you know what, you've done so much out of any organization I give to. I hear the most from you in an impactful and meaningful way. You make me feel special. I feel like I am making the organization better. Yeah, I can see that my money matters and I'm going to give you more. And they are able to walk with you in your mission, which is what they desire, right? So I cannot encourage you enough. Your volunteers are your donors. Treat your volunteers and your donors as though they are just as important as prospects, okay? And that is going to supercharge your fundraising. I am now going to turn it over to Jake, who is going to continue on.
Okay. Number 3 is set big goals with specific deadlines. And you'd think this may seem like an obvious one. I was like, of course I have goals with my fundraising. Of course I have deadlines that are built in. But to really make that a public and very, very dialed in thing, so that you have not just accountability within your own team, within your staff and volunteer model, but within the community and your organization as a whole. So the first thing, big goals give you more potential for larger gifts. The easiest way that we can illustrate this is, say you were to set a $3 million campaign goal. At that level, it is very difficult for you to solicit for a $1 million gift. If you went to a donor and asked, hey, I'd love to consider a $1 million pledge over a few years, our goal is going to be 3 million. They're going to think, God, that's kind of a lot in comparison to the total overall goal. Like, why am I giving a third of the money, just me, to this campaign? But if you have a $10 million goal, asking for a $1 million gift feels very, very appropriate. So what a big goal does is it raises the ceiling for individual gifts. That goes for foundations and what you can ask for that, businesses and individuals. There are a lot of foundations that, oh, we support you every year. You kind of write a grant to us, but it's kind of an assumed yes, we get this amount. But you can actually go to that board or go to the staff of that foundation and say, listen, we're about to enter into campaign mode. I know you give us $50,000 a year when we ask for it, or if we have a project that's in that range. We'd love for you to instead consider a $500,000 pledge over the next few years. I'm not going to ask you again. We won't write any more grants, but here's what we're trying to do with a longer time frame, and you can pay that as it's appropriate for you for different tax years, or depending on what other gifts you have going out. Would you consider doing that for us? And a lot of times that's a very, very appealing thing for a board because it's less for them to sort through, and they can also make a much more substantial impact on a specific cause. So we want those big goals, even though they're intimidating, because it allows us to have the same conversation. The way that you ask for a $50,000 gift versus a $1 million gift, the scale is very not close, obviously 20 times more. But the type of conversation that you have, the way that you pipeline for it is pretty much identical. You might have a little more time for the $1 million gift, but not even always. Sometimes those are people who are our current donors and we just haven't asked for something big because we've never set a goal high enough that it would be appropriate to ask them for something that large. So we want to set big goals because we can just raise more money just by putting the bar higher. Next, deadlines inspire both urgency and specific actions to something. If we say we're just going to raise money kind of endlessly, there's no specific thing we have to accomplish X before Y so that this can happen. If we can, within our case for support or our case statement, if we're not in campaign mode, or if we're looking for a project, we want to not talk about how the gift helps us as the charity, but instead to talk about how the gift will impact the people that we service. So saying, oh, we need a new IT system, or we need new equipment because our organization's been desperately needing it for years. As a donor, I don't really care about that. I'm giving not because I want the charity to do well. I want the people the charity serves to be doing well. So we can draw that line for them. We don't have to talk about how it serves us. That we need new equipment because there are 25 kids on our waiting list for blah, blah, blah. And we can eliminate that immediately if we have another one of these machines. So I have gone from the money goes to the thing, goes to the organization, which allows us to do this. I don't have to walk that whole line with the donor in my case statement. I can just say this money will result in this happening with the population that we serve. So we want to draw those lines for donors and say, and because this is such an urgent need, we need to have this ready to go before 2024. So that gives them kind of, okay, specific deadline for action. Another great illustration of this, even non-fundraising related, is do you ever notice how on your to-do list, the tasks that you have tend to fill the time that you have to do them, regardless of how much time it is? If you have 3 months to write a blog post, you'll probably take a couple months to write that blog post. But if you have until tonight at 7 p.m., somehow you can still get it done before tonight at 7 p.m. This is any example, but tasks will tend to fill the space that we give them regardless. So if we want to raise more money and use this powerful strategy to help bolster our fundraising revenue, give ourselves a shorter time frame. That's why we try to stay inside of 3 years for a campaign. And even for that, our silent phase is much shorter than 3 years. And we want to, by year 3, be pretty much in wrap-up mode if we can and get most of that big dollar revenue in on the front end. So big goals, specific deadlines. Next. The next thing is it directs the funds to a specific initiative. This is actually more of a fundraising trend that we've just seen donor preference over the last 10, 15 years. It used to be that we're a charity, we'll spend your money wisely, we promise, we are good stewards of the dollars. Donors anymore, with the growth of things like donor advised funds and donor designated foundations where they have a set number of charities or list of charities that they always give to. They just give everything to the foundation. The foundation manages their entire charitable portfolio instead of interfacing with the donor directly. This is more and more common, but it goes along the theme of donors saying, I want to be a little more specific and I want to have a little more agency over the impact of my dollars and specifically what it does for the world. So instead of saying we're raising money to support these things, we want to list the actual accomplishments, the actual changes that these dollars will make. And we can do this with a story. We can do this with data or numbers. We can talk about need. There's all kinds of things we can do. There's no necessarily wrong way to do it, but we do want to have a specific something we're raising money for. So even if we're not in project mode, even if we're not in campaign mode, which we should be because we'll be raising more money if we do, even if we're not those things, we do want to have some specific areas of funding with relative price tags on it. We don't have to have, the exact dollar amount on there, but hey, this is kind of the range of what this costs. And this is why we're trying to raise money for that. Jared mentioning the crowdfunding thing earlier. That's why those are so effective. Like I've had some success both personally and professionally on crowdfunding platforms. And it was because I was really, really specific about what I was trying to accomplish. Hey, at this dollar amount, we can do X, Y, and Z. Here's our budget and our spending for that. At this dollar amount, we can do X, Y, and Z. Here's our dollar amount spending for that. So a specific initiative will always encourage people to stretch their giving. The next is it allows us to ask for pledges and, again, stretch the donor's giving. So if we have someone who gives, say, $1,000 to us on an annual basis, and they have for a while, they are a great candidate to ask for a $10,000 pledge. So that's crazy. That's 10 times the amount. They've never given us anything in that ballpark before. A, we probably never asked them. And B, we try to want to shift them to the pledge model. So instead of me asking Marty for $1,000 every single year, and maybe I have a handful of stewardship meetings and a handful of cultivation meetings, and I have to spend that time cultivating and restarting that gift each year, I can say, we'd love to have you consider a pledge of $10,000. You can pay it rounded into any tax year you want. You can pay some from your business, some personally. You can pay it all in month 36 if you want. You can wait until the very end to pay the whole thing. Put it in an investment account. You can wait for stocks to appreciate. You have a good month in the S&P 500, pull a little bit off the top and transfer it over then. And there's so many different flexible options that people have in this case, and it allows people to get excited about, I just want to enter into this kind of giving space. It gives me more control over what I do. But at the same token, you end up with more money in the end as the charity. But if not, even more importantly, it frees up more of your time. So now instead of 3 times in a campaign, me soliciting Marty for a $1,000 gift, I talk to Marty 1 time for a gift, and I make a promise that I'm not going to ask her for money again for the entire campaign. This is your gift up through the end of 2026. I'm not going to bother you again. So when I do interact with Marty, it's to say thank you, it's to invite her to events, share information, talk a story about someone we've served. So all those interactions are very, very positive. And going back to what Shauna was talking about with stewardship, if we get to interaction number 25 or 26 with that donor, and all they're used to is getting told thank you and you're awesome and come to this event, when you sit them down to renew that pledge, the answer is going to be automatically yes. What we want to avoid is the opposite, where every time I call Marty, I've got my hand out. So when Marty sees caller ID on her phone and I'm calling her, she goes, "Oh, I know what he wants. I can't afford that phone call. I'm not answering." So then Marty becomes very hard to track down all of a sudden. So we want to train almost in a Pavlovian way, train our donors that when we call, it's to share, it's to offer, it's to give, it's to build excitement. And we have that one ask that stretches out over a longer time frame. If you can, and this is one of our biggest pet peeves, because we tend to get a lot of pushback even from our clients on this. If you can put all of your fundraising in one basket, so event revenue, your end of year campaign, your spring appeal, your campaign for this, your overall capital campaign. People try to put this in different buckets and count it in different ways. We're raising 300,000 here and 25,000 here, and this is for this initiative. You will do much better if you can just set one giant campaign goal. Any dollars that you get in goes into the one big bucket. Again, to support the setting a bigger goal allows you to have for bigger gifts. So without even having to change your existing fundraising or even bring in more revenue, you can say now, instead of our campaign being 300,000, we've actually raised 750. If you count all of our event revenue, the mail appeal that we did back when, our memorial giving, go down the list of all the stuff that you have, but please, please, please put all of your giving in one basket so you can extend that goal. You say, well, we have several things we need to be funding. We can't put it all in one basket. We have also seen in the last 5 years, particularly, a shift towards like a pillar approach, an umbrella campaign approach to fundraising. So instead of having a bunch of small projects that are their own little one-offs, we have one big campaign umbrella with like 4, sometimes even 5 or 6 pillars or initiatives. You can get away with 3 as well. That's fine. That are specific buckets that people can give into, or they can just go to area of greatest need. So regardless of what area they're funding or how they're funding it, or if they're going to an event or going through the mail, or if it's a cash donation, all of these are counted in the same way. You can have them in the individual pillars, but we do want to have one overall umbrella that captures the entire dollar total for a multi-year pledge approach. Helps tremendously. And the result of that, of course, is that average of 6 to 10 times your fundraising revenue. We have great data on this of people who are in campaign mode or not, have a specific project or not. You have larger and more impactful campaigns, and you end up extending your portfolio to have more high dollar donors. So this doesn't necessarily increase total number of donors, although if your time is freed up, it should. But the one thing that we know for sure is it allows us to access a bigger pool on that top end of the pyramid, or bottom end. I don't know which one you count. The more expensive end of the pyramid. All right. 4th and final transformational strategy: recruit and train a large volunteer team. Now, there are the two most successful types of fundraising entities or types of charities in this country are religious organizations and schools. And they have kind of opposite approaches to fundraising. Religious organizations tend to be very volunteer driven, and they go very, very peer-to-peer to the masses, and they do almost all one-on-one cash donations through a volunteer model. Schools, on the other hand, tend to have big staffs. They both raise a ton of money. So there's not necessarily one that's better or worse. The difference is that schools have a bigger starting budget to invest in staff. My alma mater, the University of Georgia, has over 100 major gifts officers who their only job is to fly around the country and ask alumni for money. And they know that they can raise at least 5 times those salaries. So why not hire 200 if they have, this ability to talk to people and be successful? They know that's a profitable model. Most charities, especially in our constituency and our client base, don't have the staff bandwidth or the budget to hire 10, 15, or 25 development professionals, people whose only job is it to fundraise. So we tend to go more toward the churches, hospitals model, which is also just as successful, but kind of works better within our base of budget and our staffing structure. So that's recruiting a large volunteer team just dedicated to fundraising. We try, if we can, have about 30 to 50 total individuals working around 3+ hours a month only on fundraising. This is outside your board. Of course, you can invite your board to participate in this, but this is our kind of bread and butter volunteer model. If you've been a client of Pride, you've seen the org charts. And we want to try, instead of getting a few people to give a lot of time, we want to get a lot of people to give a little bit of time and be very, very purposeful with how we use those 3 hours a month. That's including if we have a monthly meeting or quarterly meeting, but we want to have about 30 to 50 total people that we recruit over the course of, it takes 3 to 6 months or so. But once you have that entity built out, then you have this group of free labor, essentially 3 hours a month each, that gets you 1 degree of separation from just about anybody. Some important points about this. The first is that you can recruit all the best talent in your community. Imagine if you were to start a business, start a local business, and you could hire all of the most successful, experienced, and expensive people in your community to run that business. Do you think that would be a pretty successful business? Probably so. If you get all the best business minds and all the most successful people and all the most generous and connected people in the community and say, you're going to be on my VPs, you're going to be my managers, you're going to help me strategize and grow my team, that would be a pretty great business to run. We almost literally get to do that. We do get to hire for free the best minds and the most generous, talented people in our community. And we can do this through recruiting them towards a large volunteer organization. Our hope, of course, is that they serve on our board and that kind of thing. There's always, pools for board talent that we're competing for with everybody else. But if we can keep that total time really, truly to 3+ hours a month, we know we could be successful building those people out and getting them all organized. This is a low cost solution to what we're doing. And also we don't want to overwork any single volunteer. So often the case, when we start with a new organization, they'll say, oh yeah, we have a philanthropy council. There's 7 of them. They do great work. Sometimes in the off season, they tend to get burnt out because there's a lot that they're doing. 7 people is not enough people. We can't ask them for so many hours that they're going to get tired of what we're doing. We might have a couple of rock star volunteers who want to give more. Maybe they're retired or maybe they don't have to work. There are exceptions to this, of course, but if you want to get kind of your working family age, socioeconomic status person to be involved in these things, you have to make it appealing of, hey, we're going to 3 to 5 hours a month at the most, 3+ hours a month. And we're going to really stick to that. Here's what we're going to do in meetings. Here's your responsibilities in between. And here's how we're going to pipeline for these gifts. So not overworking your volunteers by having enough of them total. We try to have these organized into about 4 to 6 different committees. And if you're a client of ours, we obviously walk you through, what those should be and how many should be in each one and who should belong on those. But we want to organize them by giving type and giving size. So we have a business one, we have a one for lower end gifts, we have a one for signature and naming level gifts, estate giving, that kind of thing. And depending on that person's connections and depending on their skill sets and their friend groups and their giving level, we know that getting them organized into those different spaces and having them specific to a type of giving is the most efficient way to do it. The way that we pipeline and try to find and cultivate and solicit and go through the whole process of fundraising for $1,000 gift is very different than $1 million gift, obviously. So we set up, kind of an optimized workflow for each of those different types of giving so that each team of those 4 to 6 are pretty successful. You have teams as small as 6 people, sometimes as many as 15, but it's generally in that range, tends to be pretty successful. And of course, the result of all this is that you have staff time saved. You don't have to hire more FTEs to do the same job. You have a well-rounded and consistent asking at all giving levels. So you have a pipeline for lower end gifts. You have a pipeline for business gifts and foundation giving. You have a pipeline for major gifts. And you have a very well-rounded portfolio in terms of your pipeline. But I think the most important advantage to having a well-trained, well-recruited, and bolstered volunteer organization is you have access to just about anyone in your community by 1 degree of separation. And that's the number one thing, the number one difficulty, the number one hurdle to overcome is getting to people. The biggest factor in deciding if I'm going to give to a charity or not, the number one factor, tons of great data on this, is who asks. Who makes the ask? I could have no clue about what your charity does. But if I know Marty and she works there and she says, Jake, I know this is your first time hearing about what they do, but like I've been involved for years. We're giving X, Y to the campaign. I'd love to have you consider it. And my response generally would be, I don't really know them, but if you've vetted them and you endorse them, I trust you. Sure, I'll take a pretty good look at this. So having that 1 degree of separation where you can get a meeting with almost anybody, that only happens if you have access in kind of this larger spider web of network so that your one fundraising person doesn't have to worry about making 70 relationships work throughout the community or start 70 relationships from scratch as you're building your fundraising program. You get your volunteers going, even if they have 1 relationship each, you're already ahead, or 2 each, and they already will. So this is a wonderful, wonderful thing that results from this, and obviously a pretty powerful strategy. So with that, we will wrap it up here. We're right on time. So any questions for all of these that we've gone through today? We have one question from Karen. What are your suggestions for maintaining relationships in an organization, not the current one, that insists donors be turned over to the donors relations offices for stewardship is now outside? Okay, yeah. So what you're saying is they're kind of getting just by the policies in your organization, they're getting pushed to these other people. That is a complicated question, but I can do my best to give you kind of the high level answer. And of course, Marty, Trish, if y'all want to jump in and give your 2 cents on this as well, it'd be helpful. It would be helpful if you could ask to have some say or some connection in that stewardship process. I know it makes sense to have designated people to do that, saying, hey, here's the person that you work with. But it will only help you if the person who makes the ask at the end of whatever list of stewardship options that you have, to have that same person be the one who makes the ask. So if you're creating the relationship, they trust you, you should be the one who makes the ask, the person you connect with the most. And you say an MGO cannot put them back in their portfolio without a plan to solicit within another 12 months. We would certainly suggest, based on a ton of great data, that you push that to 36 months. We know you'll raise more money in the long run, and your donor attrition rate will be much, much better than the national average if you can push that from 12 to 36 months. There's a great Black Bod study on that. There's tons of great information out there on why that should be the case. Anything to add on that, Marty or Shauna, before we go into the next?
I would just add that that's sort of why, if you're utilizing volunteers and engaging them in that process, I mean, people want to keep that connection and that relationship. And I know that you may be up against policies and whatnot, but I just would say that's, again, another advantage, is like you keeping people that you can manage still the relationship with, but that your volunteer team can assist you with that stewardship as well, so that you can stay connected to those people. Is really, if you think about it yourself, having those relationships, I mean, it's all about relationships, and we want to do business with people that we know and trust, right? As individuals, if we're asking it. So, yeah.
And last question of the day, how would you structure or schedule those 3+ hours each month with the volunteers who are helping? We want first to include the actual monthly meeting. Eventually, as programs get more mature, you can go to every other month or even quarterly. Some of our really mature programs, their teams only meet quarterly. But the first hour, we'll call it, is gathering together, sharing information, swapping prospects, all that kind of stuff. And then those additional 2 hours are them making phone calls and setting up in-person meetings with their team of prospects. A couple of exceptions to that in the annual gifts and planned gifts. We'll walk you through those. But in general, I have 1 hour where I show up, hopefully in person, sometimes on Zoom, to talk about prospects, who's got what, and then assigning out like a person or maybe two in a month. So like my only job is to get Shauna to come to lunch with me and the development director. And that might take 2 hours of trying to track her down and call her, and also having the lunch itself is included in that time frame. So between the meeting, me calling Shauna, and having that lunch, it's about 3 hours. That's about what you can ask per person per month. Multiply that times 36 months. That's a ton. That's a ton of pipelining for big gifts. Great question. All right, I will turn it back over to Marty to see us out of here and give